Kaizen Ninja is a philosophy and an organization, training your team members on how to implement process improvement well and have some fun doing it. I am Kirsten Gallagher, the Kaizen Ninja. What I do is I pull your team together that has had a process that's been broken for maybe 2 months, maybe 2 years. From days 1 through days 5, we actually break apart your process, identify all the opportunities to improve it, and then go ahead and make a difference by the end of the week. And the team sees tremendous transformation. They feel completely empowered having lived through that and making it happen themselves. And so they walk away so excited with how that turns out and the new process that they're able to run with. So in any process, you have the value-added piece of it that is making a difference to your customer or your client. That's what they're paying for. That's actually, if you think about a product, it's changing the form, fit, or function of that product. Well, in order to bring that to life, there's a whole bunch of different activities that you have to do that are also non-value added. And that might look like moving across the site to go and get a tool that you need to come back and work on that product. It might look like waiting for the right part to get to you when you need it so that way you can process it. And so if someone was actually watching all the steps in your process, their goal, if you're identifying the 8 wastes, is to begin to say, hey, where are we not adding value to the product? And what can we do to streamline that? It's called the 8 wastes. And the most common acronym that you can use to remember it is called Tim Woods. And that's TIMWOODS. Let me explain to you what each of those are. So T stands for transportation waste, and that is the movement of parts or information. And so if you think about anytime you are moving an item from one place to the next place, and you're really not changing it in any way, that is a type of waste in just the processing of that, because you're not actually changing the part in any way. You're just moving from point A to point B. So that's T. I is inventory waste, and this is just the buildup of different types of material or information. And what you'll find is actually inventory waste is where it consumes a lot of time and resources to move stuff around, to reorganize your inventory, or to wait to get processed. And so if you think about an assembly line, it's a perfect example. If you have 5 pieces waiting to go into the next step, then all of those parts are a type of inventory that when the next part comes in, is going to be sitting in that queue for however long it needs to wait to get processed. That's inventory waste. Motion waste is the type of waste that any person is doing in their process. It could be on a macro level, like they're walking across the room or across the plant or anywhere to get a tool or a part. Or it could be on a micro level where they're working at a workstation, and every time they process a part, they have to reach and bend down a little bit to grab something they need. And so that would be a type of motion waste, because each of those things takes minutes or hours or seconds. And so that all adds up. So W is waiting, and this one's the most obvious waste because you feel it when you're waiting for a part, a piece of information, anything that's key that you need to operate. Even if you think about waiting for the printer, and right? When you're waiting for the printer, it's like, why is this taking so long? It's only 3 minutes, but it's so annoying. But when you go into manufacturing sites or any regular type of process, maybe it's an onboarding process in a service industry, there's going to be layers of approvals. There's going to be different people that you need different collaborations with, and you're going to wait for that key information, those key sign-offs, and that can be so excruciating if you are waiting for minutes or if you're waiting for days for those types of responses. All of that time is non-value added. The first O is overproduction, and this is considered the worst waste typically. And overproduction is when you produce anything before it's actually needed. And so if you think about it and you say, hey, I want to make sure that I have X number of parts available in case our customer orders them, you're going to produce before it's needed. And it is a high likelihood that some of those parts won't be needed. If you're producing defects, which we haven't talked about yet, but if you have defects in any of them, then that is multiplying the defects. If you have transportation and movement waste and inventory waste, all those things are building based on that overproduction. And particularly if you're in manufacturing and you have anything that expires, so for example, you have glue, you have a chemical that you put on it, you have some type of drug that you're coating your production with. If you overproduce and then don't end up using it in the time that that expires, then all of that ends up being scrapped. So overproduction is technically the worst waste that you have to continue to manage and figure out how to support it. It's like an iceberg. When you have overproduction, that actually covers the bottom of the iceberg, so you don't see all the problems under it. And then as you begin to lower your inventory levels strategically, not all at once, but it helps you actually identify where your true challenges are, and then you can address them directly. So that's where process improvement is magic. So our next waste is overprocessing. And this is where you do extra steps that aren't needed. And this could be something that is done as an accident, or it could be an intentional extra step that you're doing, but is still non-value added. So for example, I was in a company and they changed the way that two panels were fastened together. But in engineering, they forgot to update the drawing to remove the drill hole from the previous fastener. And so every single time that panel was being processed, it would get the extra drill in it. So that's a really simple example of overprocessing. Obviously, when that was found, that was just updated to eliminate that. But there was levels of communication to identify that and have that go through the system. Another way that you might find overprocessing, which happens all the time, is that, and this is the intentional one, is where I say, hey, I'm actually going to rearrange these items to put them in the best configuration so that the next person has something optimal to work with. And then what you do is if you follow the parts, usually that next person rearranges them in a different way and then works on them. That's a great example of overprocessing because both individuals are actually doing extra work that isn't changing the form, fit, or function or adding value to the end customer in any way. D is defect waste. And this is where you have either scrap or rework. Scrap is the most obvious, and that's when you produce something, there is an error in it or a mistake, and this could be something that you do electronically, digitally. It could also obviously be with the part. And when you have that error, you throw it out or you scrap it completely. And that's really obvious. A lot of times the hidden waste in defect waste is the rework. And that's where we made an error and we're like, oh, we're going to save this. And so now you go back through multiple process steps to rework it. So that way you're not scrapping the material, but a lot of times there is a ton of time, energy, and resources that are put into actually reworking that part or that step in the process. So the rework waste is usually hidden because a lot of times you're so used to having to rework it, you automatically assume that's part of your process. And so it ends up feeling like it's built into the process, but it's actually defect waste. Our last one is S, and that stands for skill, which could apply to underutilized skill or overutilized skill. And usually this means that the individuals who are working that process, their skills aren't utilized to their optimal level. And so that could involve the fact that they have some ideas to improve the process and have a knowledge of the other wastes that are happening, and they're not speaking up or you're not empowering them to do something to take care of that. It could also be a scenario where you don't necessarily have the right skill set for the job. So you have someone who's highly, highly trained in an entry-level position or role, or the opposite, where someone is newer to your organization or newer to that skill set, but you elevate them because you need to fill that position that's a little bit more complicated. And that could actually impact the other wastes in different ways as well. So from my opinion, underutilized skill is one of the most impactful wastes because it really is pervasive. And whenever you have these opportunities, they really make a difference for impeding the flow of the value-added parts. And so how do you actually use your skills and your human resources in the absolute best way possible. My favorite thing when I see a client succeed is knowing that the people who are involved, not only do they look at their process in a different way, but they have this hope and inspiration for how they can continue to work with it right now and then continue to grow it. Because it's all those little changes that add up over time that is really powerful in any organization. I am Kirsten Gallagher, the Kaizen Ninja.